Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the Three Topics Gamer, here to share with you a fairly interesting episode of the People's Questions, where I answer a series of questions that have been sent to me over the last week. I gotta admit, before I start, I just want to congratulate everyone who happened to send in your questions for the last episode, because this is a bit of a rarity. We're gonna have a pretty extensive episode this time around, as I'm sure you can tell from the time length. But for the first time in a very long time, I didn't get a single question that I thought I wanted to answer in the comments section. Nothing was all too simple. Everyone really stepped up their game from last episode, so heck, congrats. So, like always, if you do happen to enjoy this episode by the end, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep track me on my future videos. And also, please do not forget to check me out on Twitch, as I will be continuing to be streaming PlayStation exclusive content from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. or sometimes between 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. It just depends on the mood I'm in. And I've been having a really great time and fun time while streaming on Twitch. So, starting off with the first question, coming from Z-Visions, sorry. You want to know, have I ever been into competitive gaming, or have I always just been sticking to story-based games? I don't really play competitively. I just think if you had to play competitively, that would just take up too much time. But I'm typically a story-driven gamer. I mean, I'll occasionally go on and play something with a multiplayer, or like I've been playing like a lot of Apex when I'm not playing Horizon with my brother, but that's about it. But in terms of like competitive, no, like I'll just play it for fun. I don't take things too seriously or get too worked up when I play games. And heck, I'm not getting paid to do so, so I don't see a point. Next question comes from Brady Burke. You want to know, what is my favorite Resident Evil moment? I guess Chris punching the Rock in 5. I thought that was pretty cool. I think Leon and Krauser's knife fight in Resident Evil 4. I thought that was pretty awesome. I thought Jake punching the Usnek in Resident Evil 6 was pretty cool. Let's see what else. I think the first time you run into Mr. X in the remake of Resident Evil 2, like that first moment, I think that's also, that definitely sets the tone of what you could expect from that game. But those just a few moments off the top of my head from like specific different Resident Evil games that I really enjoy the most. Next question comes from Zach Tarf. You want to know, do I think that some story elements in Resident Evil 5 and 6 were dumb and stupid? I think, well, there's a lot of dumb stuff in Resident Evil, even going back to the first one. But, I mean, the one thing that I still can't quite figure out is how Simmons was able to transform into all those different forms. It just didn't make any sense. I mean, first he started out as like some type of like rhino, and then he turned into a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and then he turned into like a saber-toothed tiger with a Gatling gun on the back, and then he turned into a giant fly. I was like, what do any of these transformations have to do in common with each other? I don't understand why he's turning into these different forms. It was just weird. In terms of Resident Evil 5, not really. I mean, I just think people's complaints about this, they didn't like that it was co-op, and that a good amount of the game, really the first half of the game, took place in the day, which I didn't have a problem with. I mean, some people think that, in order for a horror game to be a real horror game, it has to take place at night. But I think there's something to be said if you can experience something horrifying in the day. I mean, think of a zombie apocalypse. I mean, heck, you'd be running into zombies day and night. I mean, that's creepy. So no, they all have their dumb moments, but every Resident Evil game has that, but it's nothing that, in my opinion, breaks the game. Just things that I thought were just questionable story decisions. That's as far as I would go. Next question comes from the Batman of Neo Gotham. He wanted to know, what were some story elements in a video game that I personally thought was really interesting and creative? Well, one that even to this day really sticks out to me is the twist in Infamous 1. Now, for those of you that haven't played Infamous 1, awesome PlayStation exclusive franchise, you find out that the main villain of the game is actually an older version of yourself. Now, as far as I know, I cannot recall any movie, book, or TV show that I can think of where that was the case, in which the older version made a choice not to deal with the beast. He thought he would just take his wife and kids and flee the city and just like, I have powers, but it's not my issue. only for that to backfire and his wife and children to be killed anyway. So, using a good amount of his power, he goes back in time and trains his younger self in order to prepare for the threat, and even goes so far as to kill his future wife so that, the younger version of him is more motivated to take on the beast, because it came down to that. Just amazing. I still have seen very few video games or movies or books that I've read that have had a twist that I thought that was that interesting, because I literally did not see it coming. I really didn't. I think they hinted at it only in the final battle when he was during the Battle of Kessler, when he sang a few things, but I had no hints, no ideas, nothing to give me the indication that Kessler was an older version of Cole, and I still think that is absolutely amazing. Next question comes from Virgil, the son of Sparta. You want to know, if I could direct a Resident Evil game, what would it be about? Could I give a base summary or plot, and would it be over-the-shoulder perspective? Of course it would be over-the-shoulder perspective. What kind of question is that? I'm not making this game a first-person shooter, and I'm not using those ridiculous tank controls that make those older games completely broken and unplayable. So of course it's going to be over-the-shoulder. But if I had to do a story, I think the base summary would be something like this. Chris goes on an assignment by himself to find something. I just make something up. And he goes missing. Now, at this case, Jill, who's been retired, they kind of let's say the BSAA go to Jill. And there's Jill, we know you're retired, but Chris has gone missing. We've sent multiple agents to try to find him. None have been successful. Could you go and try to find Chris? And Jill will be like, well, I'll give it a shot, but since I've been out of the game for a while, I think I might need some help. And this is something I think we've needed. Jill calls Claire Redfield, and she informs Claire that her brother is missing and wants to know if she could accompany her to go find Chris. So for the first time, you actually have Jill Valentine and Claire Redfield meeting to team up to rescue Chris. It is still amazing that after all these years, officially, Jill Valentine and Claire Redfield have still never met. We know that Chris and Leon have met. I think Jill might have met Leon in some side game, if I remember correctly, but you've never had the two primary female characters actually meet. They're connected to Chris, which many consider to be the primary main character of Resident Evil. I just think to not have that moment happen this far into Resident Evil is an utter crime. It should have happened years ago. If you're gonna bring back Jill in a newer game, I want her to team up with Claire. That needs to happen. Next question comes from Shadow Decis Gaming. You want to know, Uncharted or Tomb Raider? Which one do I prefer and why? Okay, let's say we're talking about the games. Okay, if we're comparing Uncharted to the old Tomb Raider games, Uncharted wins hands down. If we're comparing Uncharted to the remake or rebooted Tomb Raider games, I will go with Tomb Raider. And here's why. Both of these games are incredible. But I think where Tomb Raider, at least for me, has a bit of an advantage over Uncharted is I like that Tomb Raider is much more open world, as opposed to Uncharted, which is very linear. Now, there's a few sections, and I believe Uncharted 4, where they kind of open it up a little bit, but it's very, very small. And therefore, it is very straightforward. It's impossible to get lost. But with Tomb Raider, not only is it more open world, it has a lot of RPG elements. And therefore, to be honest, if you could pick which game you know you're going to spend more time playing, it's going to be Tomb Raider. And even if you go to something like, say, Uncharted 2, Uncharted 2 and Rise of Tomb Raider are both 10 out of 10 games for me. But one is more expansive and much more open, and they both kind of have similar settings, and they both have multiplayer, if I remember correctly, even though I would say that Uncharted's multiplayer is much better. But I just think that in terms of time value, I would just prefer Tomb Raider. Although I admit that Uncharted is still an incredible franchise, and definitely one of the all-time greatest PlayStation exclusive franchises that Sony's ever created. But yeah, I would kind of give the slight edge to Tomb Raider just because I spend more time and there's RPG elements, it's much more open world, and therefore I just feel like there's more to do in those games. Next question comes from Artis Gant. And you want to know, do I think the Patriots were slightly justified in controlling digital information after they explained the reasons for it? I'm sure they had their reasons. I mean, you have to remember the Patriots organization when Brady and Belichick were there. I mean, Belichick's still there. Was very, very hush hush. You didn't really understand how they could be so successful over such a long period of time. And yes, I know there are two sides you can view the whole Spygate thing, and we just confirmed that the whole Deflategate thing was a total farce, and the NFL knew it. So really, the only thing that people can hold anything against the Patriots is Spygate, which even looking back on that is like, yeah, that's kind of shady, but heck, other teams were doing that before. It was just the Patriots were the first one that everyone knew was kind of doing what they were doing, but got caught doing it. And then from that point on, everyone sort of changed it. But look, I don't question their success. I mean, as long as you're doing it in a clear, honorable way, heck, I'm not going to question the men, the boys upstairs. They as long as we're winning, I got no problem with that. As long as it's not like blatant cheating, that's just wrong. Next question comes from Night at Slayer. You want to know, what, in my opinion, the funniest video on my channel? Well, I'm not a very funny person, but I do know that early on in my channel, I did try to do a bit of comedy. And there are two videos that stand out. One was I tried to do like a parody sketch, a review for Batman. I don't remember which one it was. I'm sure it's still up. But I dressed up as Batman, and I was doing the whole Batman voice. It was a complete and utter disaster, and I still uploaded it. It might still be up. But the one that definitely sticks out to me is my review of Movie 43, which still to this day remains the worst movie I'll ever watch. I still have not seen anything since then that I thought was worse. And it was just the whole idea that going into Movie 43, I didn't know what it was. And then when I got out, I was like, what the heck did I just watch? There were some like that movie had a star-studded cast, and I don't know how that they pulled that off. I mean, they were blackmailing some people to be in this movie, and it's just crazy. I mean, if you guys wanted me to leave a link to that review, let me know, and I'll like comment down below, and I'll leave you a link. But yeah, I would probably say that's the one that really mentally broke me, and I was just freaking out in that review. I mean, I was talking about I needed to do coke while I was watching this film. There was like only one other person in the theater, and he was all messed up, and he left at some point, I think. I was just losing it. I couldn't sit down. I had to stand up. I mean, no one else was in this theater. It was just me and this one other guy, and he left 30 minutes in. So I was there by myself. I was literally freaking out. I was wondering, oh my God, why is this actor in this movie? What is he doing? Oh my God, that's the joke. Why are they still going? It ain't working. Okay, that is just blatantly disgusting. Who thought this was a good idea to film this? It's all over the place. It's like the only review that mentally just broke me down, and it's still up. So if you want to see me really freak out, I would say that's the video to check out. But yeah, I personally don't think I'm a very funny person, but that's like the one video that I know that stands out the most. Next question comes from Red Guilties, and you want to know, Brian, do you think we should get a full remake of Terminator vs. Robocop video game on the SNES and Sega Genesis? I don't think we need to remake that, but if they want to say like remaster it and like update the graphics a little bit with the same gameplay style, and then release it on like the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live for like $10, that's something that I could definitely get into. I think something like that I think a lot of people would have fun with that. And the last question of the episode comes from Black Shadow Knight. And you want to know, stop me if I'm getting too personal, but what is the most impactful moment of my life that made you the person you are today? Oof. Okay. Yeah, I thought a lot about this one. I think 3 main events probably happened. I think playing Final Fantasy VII was impactful because it not only established the type of gamer I became, it kind of established the direction I wanted to go with my life. I mean, like all throughout, when I went through middle school and then high school, I was like, I wanted to get in the gaming industry. I so wanted to get into it because I just love gaming that much. That changed recently, where I kind of feel like I'm at the age where like we spent a good amount of time trying to get into the game industry, and at this point it's just not a point. So we should probably look at a different career direction, which we are doing currently. The other event that stands out the most is probably finding out my parents were getting a divorce. Now, my mom announced that my parents were getting a divorce when I was about 16. And it was a bit shocking, but in some cases it made sense when I took a step back and I tried to look at my parents as individuals. Because one thing that is blatantly clear was that my mom and dad, personality wise, had nothing in common. And I mean nothing in common. My dad was a farm boy from Maryland. My mom grew up in Compton in LA, so east and west. My dad was a military man. My mom didn't really have much of a career direction. My dad liked listening to country music. My mom listening to R&B. They were just it was water and oil. And it's something that, marriage-wise, it probably should not have happened. But I think that when my older sister was born and they weren't married yet, I think my dad, being the traditional man who grew up by the old school rules as he was, with the whole idea that if you got someone pregnant, you married them. I think that's kind of what led to the marriage, and the fact that he saw through it as long as he did is just a testament to how much he really wanted a family of his own, despite how difficult it was. That stood out. I guess one of the most recent ones is, when my father died. We didn't see it coming. It was a total shock to me. If my dad had passed away at the age of 70, I could have accepted that. But the fact that my dad was so healthy, and I had just taken him to the hospital like a month later to get a checkup, and he was as strong as the ox. And me and my sister still have arguments on exactly what may have killed Dad. We don't agree on exactly what killed him. She has her chain of thought, and I have my own chain of thought, because I'm like, this wouldn't make sense for it to happen to Dad when it did. It just didn't make sense, and it got even scarier because both my uncles, who on my dad's side, died the same way within 5 years. I lost one of my uncles maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and then I lost my last uncle on my dad's side the same way just last year. And I thought, what are the odds that all three of them died within 5 years of each other the exact same way? That idea was scary to me. But I just think the fact that I think we lost our dad probably too soon. I think maybe a few years too soon. And my dad was really the rock of the family. At this point, my mom was on her own doing what she's doing now. We were also reliant on Dad, so when Dad suddenly was taken from us, we didn't really know how to cope. And I think even now, we're at the point where we kind of need to separate. We need some time away from each other to grow on our own. And that's something that I do plan on doing later this year. So yeah, I say those 3 moments probably the ones that kind of stick out the most in terms of my personality and making me the person I am today in a very significant way. So yeah, and again, don't feel too by the way, don't feel too shy to ask me personal questions, because heck, you guys are my main source of being social. So heck, if you guys have a question you want to ask me, it's a personal one, heck, feel free to ask me. If you don't mind it being public, if you want to ask me a private question on Twitter, message me there and I'll have no problem answering that question. So that'll about do it for this certainly extensive episode of the People's Questions. I want to thank everyone for sending in a great set of questions. Maybe we can repeat in next week's episode. But if you have any more questions you would like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below. And make sure you get to enter me roughly before next Wednesday, before noon, before I start filming the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome. And I'll see you all next week.